Hello, everyone. My name is Cam, and I'm here to talk to you about the Ogre Kingdom. Yes, that's right. The big boys of Warhammer Fantasy. I'm going to be talking about this rulebook specifically, which is the 8th edition Ogre Kingdom book. But I'm hoping that some of this advice will carry over into Warhammer the Old World whenever Games Workshop decides to release that. And just so you know a little bit about me, I do have some experience playing 7th edition as well, and I actually started with 6th edition for fantasy. And I play a lot of other games too, but we're going to keep this focused to the big boys of Warhammer Fantasy, the Ogre Kingdom. And what we're going to be doing is a 10-15 minute segment talking about each of the units in this rulebook. And we're going to be starting with the Ironguts specifically. So that's kind of the goal and structure of everything, and I hope that my information that I provide to you find useful. So Ironguts, before we get to them, are an ogre unit, which sounds like kind of a redundant point, but you'll be surprised how many things in this rulebook are actually not ogres. You've got yetis, noblars, all kinds of stuff. But ogres have some kind of key things that carry over into all their units. So I want to cover that very quick. Being an ogre means you have a high damage output because you've got 3 attacks base on average. You've got a stomp attack because you're a monstrous infantry. And you've got an ogre charge rule as well. So you got all kinds of little methods for dealing good damage as an ogre. You also are going to have a high durability because you're toughness 4 and you got 3 wounds. Again, on average for your ogres. And you're going to be pretty fast. Most ogres are movement 6, which is really surprising. But yeah, these big boys will get there quick. So those are like kind of your pros to being an ogre. The last pro I'll say is that being an ogre player typically is a terrifying thing in the Warhammer Fantasy world. Most of my opponents dread fighting my ogre army. And they think it's going to be an uphill battle. And maybe it is, because I will say ogres are pretty strong in this game. So, yeah, the sense of terror of being an ogre is always great. And most of your units do have fear, which can come into play at times. But yeah, to get into some of the cons of being an ogre, because there definitely are cons as well. You have a low model count, and that's because your models are very expensive if they're mostly all ogres. You need to have that to balance the game out. You've got all those amazing pros. You gotta pay for it in one way or another, and yeah, it's quite literally, ogres are expensive. Because of that, it can be easy to exploit an army with lesser model count. We'll go into that in a future video, kind of covering tactics and stuff in general. But yeah, you want to think about the fact that you have less models to actually field in a battle. In addition to that, you are incredibly vulnerable to war machines and templates and anything that deals multiple wounds. If you let attacks like that land on your Ogre Kingdom units, specifically the Ogre meaty hefty units you spend a lot of points on, like those Ironguts there, they will find great value. It is probably the main thing your opponent's going to bring to fight against your Ogre Kingdom is multi-wound attacks and war machines. So you will want to be thinking about how to fight against that, and we'll cover that again in a future kind of tactics video, a little bit more general. So that's just going over the pros and cons of being an ogre. To specifically talk about these Ironguts now, they're going to have a lot of those points increased. They're doubling down, to say. So what I mean by that is Ironguts specifically, that reliable damage output that ogres have, it's going up even more because you got great weapons. Strength 6 attacks with always strengths last. That will cut through most things pretty dang easily in Warhammer. And they'll be lucky to get a save against that. So that it really makes them pretty dang good at dealing damage. They also have a little bit of more durability. That ogre durability of the toughness 4 toughness 4 wounds 3. Now you got a 5-up save on top of that. It can come into play. It's nice. So yeah, the Ironguts are kind of doubling down on both of those pros that the Ogre Kingdom ogre units have. And They also are doubling down on the cons because they are even more expensive than your typical ogre because they've got that heavy armor and the great weapons. And because of that, you're going to have even less model count, which means fielding these guys in a horde formation or anything like really huge is going to be pretty dang hard. I typically am going to be running my Ironguts in what you see right here, which is a 3x3. Maybe it'll be a 3x6, and then I'll put some characters in there if it's a lesser point game. But yeah, that's typically like as big as my Ironguts are going to be getting in a game. So yeah, you definitely want to be thinking about that as well. The last thing that's kind of a con for these guys, it sounds a little weird, is they are not always the right tool for the cut. So Ironguts are expensive, ogres are expensive. You could get more ogres if you took ogre bulls for the cost. Yeah, it's not going to be huge numbers, but like it's still going to be more ogres. And ogre bulls can take additional hand weapons, which means they could get more attacks than these guys actually can. The strength won't be as high, but they will get more attacks. So, why do I say that? Well, because the ogre bulls would probably do better given those factors against a big group of night goblins, right? These guys will do really good against a group of chaos warriors. So you kind of want to think about that. Is it overkill what I'm sending this unit against? Is this the right fight for my Ironguts to be going up against? They have this high strength factor. Am I actually taking advantage of that in this fight? Or am I just paying them against something that I could have used a lesser unit for? So you really want to think about that with them. Are they actually the right unit for the cut? And that's kind of the last con I want to go into with them. But now we're going to go into tips. Tips for these guys. What do I like to do with them? The Dragon Hide banner in this rulebook here, one of the few good magic items that Games Workshop did scrap in this rulebook here. It allows you to reroll all ones every time you charge with the unit. To wound, to hit, and your armor saves. Incredibly useful. Armor save thing, not really going to matter too much. Maybe for characters and stuff in the unit, but not really too much. The rerolling ones to wound, since you have strength 6, means most likely you're wounding on 2s. So any of the ones you roll, you're rerolling those, and pretty much it's going to guarantee everything that you worked for to hit is going to go through. Oh, actually, that brings me into one of my last cons for them that I actually forgot about. They do have a low weapon skill, and you will find that that can be exploited at times. The weapon skill 3 means sometimes you will be hitting on 5s, which is going to affect your offensive output. In addition to that, Mark and Nurgle, there are some weapons, armors in the game that give you the -1 to hit. There are things that can affect them, and that'll maybe that kind of ties into that, are they the right thing for the cut? If they're going to be going up against something and be hitting on 5s or 6s, that you really got to ask yourself, like, how many great weapon attacks am I going to be getting in here? Is it really worth it? Am I going to win that combat res? Maybe I should just shoot that thing instead of charging it with this unit. It's very expensive. But yeah, to bring it back to the Dragonhide banner there. The Dragonhide banner goes really well with them because they're going to be charging a lot of times. Movement 6 is pretty reliable for charging. And rerolling all those ones is going to guarantee that like those wounds are going to go through them most likely. And it'll help a bit for rolling to hit as well. You're probably going to get a couple ones mixed in there. Dragonhide banner goes really well with them. The breath attack thing is kind of just a little bonus offensive thing that you have. Because they're so slow, a lot of times you won't be able to use it. Sometimes you'll have them next to a unit in combat and you can use it to support that unit, but it's a rare situation. So I would really just be banking on the charge bonus that you get for that banner. The last thing I like to do with these guys is typically put my characters in this unit as a big bunker. Because they're reliable defensively and offensively, they're going to do well most of the time in combat resolutions, which means they're not going to be running away, which I want my characters to be in a unit like that. It'll be harder to snipe my characters when they're inside a unit versus on their own. And yeah, I think that a lot of times you're investing these points into this unit. When you put some characters in there, you're looking at half your army here. And what I like to do is leave them in the back, have them be my last kind of thing for fighting in combat. It varies now and then, but kind of keep them in the back. Let my war machines, range units, and skirmishers and all that jazz, secondary units, whatever, let them engage, do all the fighting, then assess the battle. Ask myself, did the first half of my army here get its points value back? And if it did, I can be really reserved with what I do with these guys, and now the pressure's on my opponent to get to them. If I didn't, then okay, I need to start hustling these guys into combat. So kind of an interesting little strategy that I really find pays out pretty well with them often. Keep them in the back, keep your characters in there, have them be your last line thing, unless there's something really like key target for them to get into. And then when the later stages of the battle come as well, and your opponent is left with a lot of pretty, half-health units. They lost 10 of their men, there's only 5 remaining or something, and that 5-man or 10-man unit is looking at that full block of ogres and stuff, there's no hope. There's no hope at all. And you can pretty much run through any unit that's left in those later stages of the battle, especially when you have a lot of range that's able to soften them up, which you'll be surprised that the ogres have quite a bit of good range. So, yeah, playing them a bit reserved, making sure that your matchup is good, and then, yeah, you just got a really good, reliable core unit. If I had to give them a grade or something, it'd be like a B+ or like A-. I think they're a great core unit. Probably not one of the best in the game, but they're definitely up there with being like a top-tier core unit. And then the very last thing I want to talk about when I get close to the keywords, I'll show you guys, is doing some kit bashing with these guys. You'll notice that some of these guys have different great weapons, which allow them to have a little bit of a more interesting pose than your typical Irongut, which has like a pose like this. So the way I do that is by using the Mournfane kit, which you'll find you have extra parts with. Just putting those right on there. Works really well, gives you a little bit of pose diversity in your unit. You can see this guy here also. So it gives you like a little bit more variety, a little bit less of the static kind of pose that this guy has here. Not say I actually love this guy. It's great, the Executioner. Yeah. Great little thing, and just so you can see what I'm talking about, you'll have the extra parts in the kit typically. This is the weapon and on the model here. A lot of the ogre stuff kit bashes really well. And the reason I say you'll have stuff like that is because you'll have to make a leader character, probably with like an ogre pistol or something, like this anyways, right? So you'll have extra great weapons laying around. You make a musician, bannerman, something like that, and you won't have that great weapon on that guy, obviously, if he's got those weapons, or loadout. So yeah, typically I find a lot of that stuff can work really well to make Ironguts. You can also take ogre bull kits and just use the torso and then put those arms on there, put a couple of shields, and then you've got way more Ironguts than you would have paid for just getting the kit. Typically, I like to get one kit of the Ironguts. It comes with so many extra parts, and then an Ogre Bull kit, and I'll just kit bash them together with other parts and stuff, and then all of a sudden I got, 2 units of Ironguts for the price of like 1.5 or something. I think you only get like 4 in the box, and it's the same price, so yeah. And then you can see here too. This is from the Stonehorn kit. Like again, like just an extra part. A lot of these ogre things are really compatible with each other. So, a little bit of hobby advice as well. That's about everything for this segment. Hope you found it useful, and I hope that your Ironguts find success chopping apart your opponents on the battlefield.